Hey guys, it's Jack. I wanted to let you know that we're starting a new push for subscriptions here on Human Events Daily. So make sure that when you're listening to this podcast, you hit subscribe, you download it, and you share it with 5 of your friends. Make sure they're all going and downloading as well, because we need to get the signal out as much as possible. Look, we've done so much over the past couple of years since this show started, and we're only going to do so much more. Let's get it. This is what happens when the fourth turning meets fifth generation warfare.
A commentator, international social media sensation, and former Navy intelligence veteran.
This is Human Events with your host, Jack Posobiec.
Christ is king.
South Carolina State Senator Lindsey Graham is dead at age 71. Graham's office says he died on Saturday evening due to a brief and sudden illness. Graham served in the U.S. Senate for more than 2 decades and became one of President Donald Trump's closest allies. He played a major role in Republican policy on national security, judicial appointments, and foreign affairs. Trump even called Graham a true American patriot and one of the greatest people and senators he had ever known.
A rarity in the nation's capital as the bipartisan housing bill becomes law without the president's signature.
This is one of the most transformational pieces of legislation in decades to try and address the housing crisis. It hits at an issue that is very important to Americans right now, which is trying to lower the cost of housing. It does that by increasing the supply of homes, by restricting Wall Street investors from buying up single-family homes, and as well making homes cheaper to build. And this is a bill, Gio, that passed with overwhelming bipartisan support from Democrats and Republicans.
Overnight, shots fired across the Middle East. U.S. Central Command announcing a new wave of airstrikes against Iran, targeting Iranian military air defense, radar sites, and drones. Iran's military firing back, saying it struck U.S. bases in Jordan, Bahrain, and Kuwait overnight. Iranian state media showing these videos of what they called retaliation, but that NBC News couldn't independently verify. While this video shows a strike near a United Nations encampment near Kuwait's border with Iraq.
8 people now charged with plotting to attack last month's UFC Freedom 250 event at the White House. All 8 now in custody, and the feds say the threat has been neutralized, but it was very real.
We're not simply airing grievances from behind their keyboards and sharing like-minded political ideologies. Rather, they took action to carry out a plot to attack the UFC Freedom 250 event and to murder federal officials at the highest levels of our government.
Well, ladies and gentlemen, welcome aboard today's edition of Human Events Daily. We're here live on Real America's Voice. Today is July 13th, 2026, Anno Domini. New information is out in the Tyler Robinson case. And in fact, this information is a little bit, it's something that had been out in a search warrant, but I think it's getting more attention now after the hearing that I attended last week. And we're going to put that out for you now, as well as in the show today, we're going to go through everything, of course, that has been going on, the aftermath. How do we put it all together? We'll have multiple levels of correspondence and multiple levels of analysis on this. But Post Millennial has a great write-up here, and I urge everyone to go check it out. Tyler Robinson used his cell phone to route from UVU, to map a route from UVU back to his St. George home after the Charlie Kirk killing. The Google Maps route is from an area on UVU campus, specifically to the address that he lived in. And this is key because that information, or that timing, the timing of that was right around, let's see here, UTC, 12:46 p.m. In Mountain Time. So of course they had it in as UTC, but we fixed that because, again, this is from the cell phone data. The starting point for the route was listed with the GPS coordinates. According to the start point coordinates, originally near the Mountain Shadow Shopping Center, according to Google Maps. This shopping center is about 7 minutes from the UVU campus. And then he traveled to a place called the Quick Quack Car Wash. Yes, the Quick Quack Car Wash. And apparently was getting his car washed there. The Utah SBI, so the Utah State investigators, went and checked out this car wash, and they found a license plate coinciding with Tyler Robinson's 2013 Dodge Challenger arriving at the car wash at approximately 12:57 hours. And of course, I would love to know whether or not he actually got his car washed, and if he did get his car washed, why? Why did he get his car washed after the killing? We know he didn't use his car for it. We have no indication that he used it. Interesting. It's an interesting loose thread right there. But of course, investigators may have more footage of his car specifically from that car wash so they could find out what he was doing and why he was there. Then, listen to this. Google Maps had a route from that area of Orem, Utah at approximately 1:33 a.m., 1:33 in the morning of September 11th, the day after the shooting. And at that time, the starting points were close to the neighborhood north of and in close proximity to the area where the aforementioned rifle, the rifle that was found after the Charlie Kirk shooting, near the UVU campus. So right in that neighborhood, Tyler Robinson used his cell phone to plug in a Google Maps route from that very same neighborhood to the apartment where he lived with Lance Quiggs at 1:33 in the morning. This information specifically comes from the cell phone data of Tyler Robinson. Question is, he had an alibi. Why does his cell phone data show otherwise? Jack Posobiec back next, Human Events Daily.
Nothing will stand in our way, and our golden age has just begun.
This is Human Events with Jack Posobiec.
Now it's time for everyone to understand what America First truly means.
Welcome to the Second American Revolution.
All right, ladies and gentlemen, we're back. Human Events Daily, Real America's Voice. Every day, more of our personal information ends up online than most people even realize. Your name, your home address, phone number, family members, old addresses, email addresses, even information from past data breaches is often just a few clicks away. Hundreds of data broker websites collect and publish that information, and unless you take action, it stays there. Someone with bad intentions can use those details to piece together where you live, who you're related to, and other personal information. If you're politically active, you work in the media, or simply value your family's privacy, it's worth taking seriously. That's where Patriot Protect comes in. Patriot Protect works to remove your personal information from data broker websites before the wrong people can use it. Instead of waiting until after you've become a victim, they help make you much harder to find in the first place. A single phone scam or identity theft incident can cost you thousands of dollars. Protecting yourself is a lot less expensive. Go to patriot-protect.com or call 833-367-8787. Use promo code POSO to save 15%. Take control of your privacy. Add some digital camo to your life and make yourself much harder to find online. All right, I want to get Will Chamberlain on here, Article 3 Project. He's joining us. He's been helping us cover the case. Will, how are you?
Doing great, Jack. Good to be with you.
And Will, you know, so much of this case, of course, has ignited a firestorm online. Very clear in my mind, the evidence that this radicalized leftist did kill Charlie Kirk. Did so for obviously political reasons. The political motive, of course, is written on the bullet casings, which, as folks may remember from the very first moment that we saw "Hey Fascist Catch" and "Oh Bella Ciao" printed on those casings, we knew that, of course, these are direct Antifa references. Hey Fascist Catch, of course, is inherently obvious. And then Bella Ciao, for folks who don't realize, is something of an Antifa anthem. It's very, very well known within Antifa circles, and in fact is something that would almost certainly require you to have knowledge of those Antifa circles to even realize the direct political references to it. People know it as a song, like my wife knows it as a song just because it's in like Netflix shows, that Money Heist show, for example. But I don't think even she would realize that it had a political motive. So that again speaks to a clear political motive. And by the same token, Will, we're now at the point of, oh, well, can you, okay, well, we can see him, in the video in the prone position the moment the shot is fired, but you can't see his face in the prone video. So therefore, it could be someone else. And it's like, what are we even doing here, guys? What are we even doing here? So Will, just walk me through, if for folks out there, and I understand the legal standard, of course, is the burden of proof is on the government. 100%. No problem with that. In fact, I agree. It always should be. I feel like they've met their standard of proof, though. I feel like they're meeting that burden. And what will happen at trial, of course, is that they need to meet it beyond a shadow of a doubt. That remains to be seen. They keep producing more and more evidence. I asked for the cell phone footage. Boom. Here's the cell phone footage, or data, I should say, from an affidavit in the search warrant from months ago saying, yes, here's his cell phone. He was using it to calculate Google Map routes from the UVU campus to a car wash, then later from the neighborhood where the gun was found at 1:33 in the morning, all the way back to his home. Gee, I wonder why Tyler Robinson was in that neighborhood at 1:33 in the morning, day after the shooting, and using it to drive home. So, Will, it's like at some point you do kind of have to ask, just from a basic common sense level, where's the alibi if it wasn't him?
Yeah, there's no alibi, and it seems these people are operating under a standard where if the evidence against Tyler Robinson is not the best conceivable evidence that could exist in any murder trial, then there's nothing to happen here, right? Then the prosecution hasn't proven its case. That's wrong. The standard is beyond, the prosecution must prove its case beyond a reasonable doubt in light of all the evidence. And there's an overwhelming amount of evidence that has been, just in that preliminary hearing. And that's not even the entirety of the prosecution's evidence here. But, you talk about the video you saw. I mean, we have, who is the figure? Well, we are able to apparently trace that figure through the various security cameras. It's a man with Tyler Robinson's build who was driving Tyler Robinson's car wearing Tyler Robinson's shoes, as identified by Lance Twiggs. And we know that Tyler Robinson was on the campus in the vicinity of the area, despite living 3.5 hours away through any number of different factoids, right? From his text messages to his Google Maps searches to his Chick-fil-A purchase to his earlier meetings that day, to his later encounter with the police who saw his license plate all the way then. And then, of course, why is his physical evidence? Why is his DNA on the screwdriver on the roof, as well as on the gun, as well as on the towel, as well as on the trigger? And why did he confess 5 separate times in 5 different specific, in different formats to different people?
Let me ask you this. So we went through, I sat in the room, I went through the entire preliminary hearing. If the defense could point to evidence that was not just exculpatory, but even exonerating of their client, would that be something that they would want to use at a preliminary hearing to say, hey, we're going to enter this cell phone data into the record, and we're going to call a witness and they did certainly call federal witnesses, but here's the federal witness or the state witness that dumped the cell phone data, and the cell phone data shows that he wasn't in Orem. I mean, isn't that something they could have done?
Yeah, they absolutely could have done that. They could absolutely, if they had evidence that could prove it, put on a witness and authenticate things like cell phone data, and through other testimony say Tyler Robinson wasn't at UVU. He was somewhere else, and he could not have been the shooter. That would be a very useful thing for them to do. And and for anybody else, it would be very easy to do. He might have been the only resident of St. George who was in Orem, Utah at that time and on the UVU campus. Because St. George is not a big town, and it's really far away. St. George is all the way in southwestern Utah, close to the Nevada border, close to Las Vegas. And it's closer to Las Vegas than it is to Salt Lake City and Orem. So, I mean, what's he doing there? Why is he in Orem, Utah? Gee, I don't know. Maybe it's because of all this other evidence. Like, yeah, he has no alibi. He was on campus. Why? What possible reason could he have to be on campus for a Turning Point event for a school he doesn't even go to?
Well, and Will, and by the way, for a guy who we're told that he hates, right? It's not like he was just attending to, see Charlie, right? Or in a sense, I think he was, but as a supporter, of course, is what I mean. And also, perhaps if you would want to call someone to, provide you an alibi, would a possible good person to give you an alibi be, say, a roommate?
Yeah, right. It would be nice if Lance Twiggs, who knows you personally, could say that they knew where you were and that you weren't on the campus at that time. But not only did Lance Twiggs say he wasn't in the apartment, Lance Twiggs said he left extremely early in the morning, 4:35, in his interview, which would give him plenty of time to make the
Earlier than his
3.5 hour
normal,
drive.
right, earlier than his normal work time, like
Right.
far just so in intelligence we would call it, pattern of life. So this was a huge break from his normal routine pattern of life.
Right. And I think one of the most interesting, I think Andrea Burkhardt pointed out that this was a really damning piece of evidence. When they searched the apartment, they found bullets and all sorts of paraphernalia for a rifle, like the one that was used in this shooting, but they didn't find a gun, right? Like, if it wasn't Tyler Robinson's gun that was used for this, why are there 30-06 bullets all over the apartment and yet no gun that to be spoken of?
Specifically, I believe they said there was no 30-06 gun found. So we don't know if there are other guns found, but at least based on
but there were 30-06 bullets found. They found 30-06 bullets with no gun,
but no 30-06 gun. And I actually did write that in my notebook. I do have as you know, there's no notes in court, so I have my notebook right here, just that I can refer to. And I specifically remember when they said that no 30-06 rifle was found. So again, this is a question where when you put something like that before a jury, people can say, oh, well, you didn't find a 30-06 rifle. Okay. But the logical inference is, kind of that, if you see, what's the line? If you see, you've got duck prints all over your house and there's a few feathers and maybe an egg, there may have been a duck there, right? So these are called logical inferences. And actually, we'll just take a minute and just walk us through that. How do logical inferences work in the criminal justice system?
Well, I mean, juries are allowed to make reasonable deductions and infer things from evidence, right? They're allowed to make convictions based on circumstantial evidence. I think actually a useful case to kind of think about, for just framework is the Scott Peterson case. You'll remember that the way that Scott Peterson got convicted, I mean, this is pre the era, this is in the 90s, I believe. This is before GPS tracking, before we all carried phones.
It was early, I want to say it was like early 2000s.
Early 2000s, but the tech was not there, right? Nobody was carrying around an iPhone, so he wasn't trackable based on that. And it took quite a while for them to be able to go and prove it in court, but they proved it through circumstantial evidence, right? They never found a murder weapon. They had no evidence that, I'm not sure exactly what the detail of the evidence that they had was, but they didn't have anything resembling either any sort of video of any kind of crime being committed ever, right? They had no video at all. They were totally reliant on, well, he was the husband and there was some DNA in his boat, which was a little weird. And then they found the body in the bay.
Quick break, guys. One thing I said to Fox was that Brian Koberger took a plea deal and all they had on him was cell phone data, a couple eyewitnesses that thought they saw his car, and one fingerprint, essentially a touch DNA on a knife sheath. So again, no direct evidence, and yet that was enough to put him away for life. Jack Posobiec, Will Chamberlain, back live for a little bit.
Talk about influencers. These are influencers, and they're friends of mine. Jack Posobiec. Where's Jack? Jack, who's done a great job.
All right, folks, Jack Posobiec back live, Human Events Daily, Real America's Voice. We are here back on the show and welcoming everyone back in. Some folks, we know they're nonstop some weeks. Early mornings, late nights, long hours on the road or in the studio. When your schedule looks like that, getting a good night's sleep isn't a luxury, it's essential. When you're waking up hot, constantly tossing and turning, just not feeling rested, your mattress could be the problem. And that's one of the reasons that the Poso family switched over to Ghost Bed. Look, every Ghost Bed mattress comes with built-in cooling technology. No expensive upgrade required. They're designed for hot sleepers, providing excellent support and make a real difference when you've got long days ahead. One thing I especially like is that Ghost Bed gives you 101 nights to try it in your own home. You're not making a decision after one night in a showroom. You get more than 3 months to see if it's right for you. And right now, you can still catch their 4th of July sale, and Human Events viewers can save an additional 10% with promo code POSO. Financing some ghost beds cost around $1 a day. That's it. So visit ghostbed.com/POSO and use promo code POSO to save even more. All right, we're back with Will Chamberlain here on Human Events. And Will, we when we just left, we were talking about this sort of these ideas of logical inferences versus, direct evidence. And by the way, that things like even DNA technically are circumstantial evidence, yet we know, of course, that they're very well accepted evidence. You do not particularly or almost ever have the kind of direct evidence of a video of the shooting itself. We actually do in this case. You don't always, and sometimes you do, to be sure, stabbings or something like that, things that happen on the street that get caught by like a flock camera or some kind of, police camera. They do happen, to be sure. But typically in cases like this, not that there is any case that's really like this, you just don't get that high level of fidelity of information the way that we are receiving now. And for the record, just I want that video to be made public. I really want it to be made public. I understand that there are concerns about jury and all the rest, but the fact that this is on video needs to be put out. It just absolutely needs to be put out, public to be able to see what's going on. Look, if the court, I was really persuaded by the media reporters' take on this, and obviously I have a bias just as someone who wants to see more evidence, as someone who works and does a show every day, that it's about the integrity of the judicial system so that the public can see what the judge is ruling on. If it's something you're ruling on and it's not graphic, it's emotional, but it's not graphic, right? You see Tyler Robinson on the top of the roof. You don't see what's happening down below in the courtyard because it's from behind. So from that token, I would say if it's not graphic, just release it. And obviously, most of the, I mean, there are graphic videos that have already been released. Certainly there are some that have not, but you already know what happened to Charlie. You've seen it. And so it's really a situation where, we've got this, I guess, Will, I was going to ask you about this as well. I said the other day that the Sixth Amendment gives the accused the right to a speedy and public trial. And yet it seems like this time around we're getting a slow and private trial in many ways.
Well, it's, the interesting thing is that the Utah system is much more open than the federal system or most states, which use a grand jury system. Because if you got to think about it, the preliminary hearing is essentially the equivalent to the grand jury. And in preliminary hearing states,
we wouldn't be getting
public
any
hearing,
of this, right?
Yeah, right. Like in a grand jury state, you just get an indictment from a grand jury and the proceedings are secret. And there is no pre-trial mass disclosure of the evidence that leads to a probable cause finding. Whereas in these preliminary hearing states, apparently they just decided like, yeah, well, we're just going to do all this in public, which, okay, that's a decision to make. And there's virtues to it. But it is weird. And I'm sitting here as a lawyer thinking like, because the voir dire process is going to involve the judge asking the jurors about their familiarity with the case and the evidence and, how much like their ability to put all that aside and just listen to the admissible evidence that's put in front of them at the trial specifically. And so from the judge's perspective, I can totally see why under the circumstances of this case with this enormous amount of media attention that he wouldn't want to put out a bunch of, air all this evidence publicly. But he seems to have decided to do air the vast majority of it. And I think, I mean, to everybody's benefit, in the sense that we really needed to quiet down all these ridiculous conspiracy theories. But it is a strange system. In many ways, I think that what we're actually demonstrating here is the virtues of the grand jury system that is more efficient and leaner, right? You don't have to wait a year to get a grand jury indictment. Like, the grand jury can handle this in a day or so, and then we'd already be well into the stage of, pretrial motions and discovery. Which, remember, we're not even really there yet. I mean, the prosecution is giving over all the discovery in the interim, but normally, this is discovery happens, the core discovery motions especially happen after indictment.
Yeah, that's a great point. And so, here I am saying, when are we going to get the evidence of the cell phone data, or when are we going to get the evidence of this, that, or the other thing? But, essentially, and this is something the media has to fight for, the public has to fight for, because this is something that the investigators already would have. They would already have that. They don't need to make it public. And of course, they said that again and again in trial. They don't need to make it public to get the conviction. All they have to do is show it to a jury. All they have to do is present in court. And of course, they have to share a copy with the defense. And that's a point that I keep coming back to, because, of course, the defense has already seen all these videos. The defense has already seen all of this data. And yet the defense has seen no reason to call any of it up, except for trying to challenge the DNA and challenge the ballistics. And so, last minute to you, Will, again, it seems the defense has all of this evidence and yet is not attempting to, quote unquote, attack the veracity of any of it to try to defend their client.
That's right. And anybody, any theories out there that's, would purport to say that somebody other than Tyler Robinson was the man who shot here, and then any of this other involvement or whatever, these ridiculous stories here about Google searches or something, none of that. The defense attorneys have, every reason in the world and every incentive in the world to try and use credible evidence to undermine the prosecutor's case, and they aren't using any of that, which should give you pause if you're one of these people proffering these ridiculous and absurd conspiracies.
Will Chamberlain, where can people go to follow you, brother?
At Will Chamberlain on X, and follow the Article 3 Project at a3paction.com.
All right, thank you. We're right back with Jay Town here at Human Events Daily.
Jack. Where's Jack? Where is he? Jack, I want to see you. Great job, Jack. Thank you. What a job you do. We have an incredible thing. We're always talking about the fake news and the bad, but we have guys, and these are the guys who should be getting Pulitzers.
All right, folks, Jack Posobiec back live here, Human Events Daily. Folks, in a world where so much is changing, the things that matter the most never do. Faith, family, freedom, and the values we choose to stand for. Even something as ordinary as your cell phone service can reflect those values. How can they do it? Well, I'll tell you how. That's what Patriot Mobile is all about. For more than 12 years, they've served Americans who want their money to support the causes they believe in, backing the Christian conservative movement, organizations that fight for faith, family, freedom. Switching is easy. You can keep your number, keep your phone, or upgrade to a new device. Their 100% US-based customer support team can have you up and running in minutes. And if you're still paying off your current phone, they can help you with a contract buyout. Best of all, Patriot Mobile offers premium priority access on all 3 major US networks. So you don't have to sacrifice reliable service to make a values-based choice. If you believe it matters who you trust with your communication and where your money goes, Patriot Mobile is worth a look. Go to patriotmobile.com/POSO or call 972-PATRIOT. Use promo code POSO to get a free month of service. That's patriotmobile.com/POSO or call 972-PATRIOT and make the switch today. Really excited to have on our next guest. First time. This is Jay Town, a former U.S. attorney and chief compliance officer at Radiance Tech. Jay, how are you?
Thanks for having me on, Jack.
Well, I'm honored to have you on. You do great work out there, and you put together a thread in the analysis, I guess, on Friday, right after the whole thing broke down, detailing. You went through 2 pieces. One was the interview of Lance Twiggs. The other was the bullets, the etchings of them, the rifle. You tied it all together. Walk us through a little bit, if you could, and just sort of your takeaways from this preliminary hearing that we had last week.
Yeah, the evidence. So before I was the United States Attorney in the first Trump administration, I was a career prosecutor, homicide prosecutor for about 13 years. Investigated and prosecuted hundreds of homicide cases in my career. I can tell you, I've never seen a case with this much evidence. Certainly haven't seen a case with more, where the guy wasn't begging to plead guilty. Now, this is a death penalty case, and typically, at least when I sought the death penalty, it was very rare that if I was determined to seek the death penalty, that I would offer any kind of a plea agreement. If I'm seeking death, then death will be the penalty, or you can whip me in court. Those are the two things that can happen. So in this case, though, and what I went through in my thread, because I'm just sort of confused isn't the right word, Jack, but the idea that there's people out there that aren't even convinced to a level of probable cause that Tyler Robinson is responsible for Charlie Kirk's murder. It just sort of anyone with a functioning limbic system should be able to get there. But these people have all these wild theories. They still will say to this minute right now, there's not one shred of evidence against Tyler Robinson. And here's what I'll just say. Well, then why is his, and this is sort of a list of the evidence very quickly. Why is his DNA on the gun? The shell casings that were found in the gun, the towel covering the gun in the very spot where he went back and looked for the gun, the screwdriver that was used to reassemble the weapon on the roof, the test shot cartridge that was found in Robinson's home. Oh, by the way, same round, make, and model as the ones that were found in the rifle. And then I think we'll find that the Dremel tool that was used for the engravings, I bet you that has his DNA on it too. But we know from Twiggs that he was using it because he asked Twiggs specifically where it was so that he could carve some things to go hunting, which is just an ominous forecast of Tyler Robinson's activities here. And then the text to Twiggs where he makes admissions. You don't usually, first of all, you don't normally get a gun in a murder case. You don't recover the gun. The gun's in the bottom of the river. It's been passed off, sold. You just don't. You might get a shell casing or two, but you don't typically get the murder weapon. We got it in this case. In his text to Twiggs, he knows exactly the location of the weapon and says there's a police car there, and he thinks they swept the area, but maybe didn't find it, and then he egresses back there to try to get it. There's the conversation with Twiggs in the home where he says, yeah, I wish I hadn't done it. And he starts crying. The note to Twiggs under the keyboard, and it was found partially burnt in the garbage. Conversations with friends, the family friend, Mike Mitchell, the conversations with his parents, all the video that you've talked about. And then, of course, the ATM report where, typically, and you and Will were having an interesting conversation about, I want that to be public. I want that video to be public. And Jack, I got to tell you, normally I would disagree with you. I would say, no. You're just making it harder on the prosecutor. Because remember, you're not just prosecuting a case to a guilty verdict. You're prosecuting a case to a guilty verdict that withstands appeal. And do you really want to have voir dire be so difficult where people, they just know so much about the case that it's hard for them to be impartial? Or they, worse yet, tell everybody they can be impartial, but they aren't. Or they say they didn't know about a piece of evidence, but there's some tweet from 2025 where they're talking about it, or they liked a tweet, and then that's a technicality on appeal. Remember, it's a death penalty case, and so it's really important on the prosecutor to get an unbiased jury because we have so much evidence. But in this case, what the defense counsel has loved to do is let the media run wild that the bullet doesn't match the gun, right? That was in the defense motion really earlier this year or late last year, and they let it run until finally we could unseal the ATF report. And what do we know from that report? A 30-06. It was Remington cartridges. The Mauser is a 30 caliber class weapon, and the type of bullet found by the medical examiner was a 30 class caliber round. And we know that because you just measure the diameter of the sort of the mushroom, the back of the mushroom, the little round part. And so that was all very important, but it was just poisoning people. And to this day, they still have that poison in their mind. Some of the evidence that we still don't have, but I guarantee exists. And you mentioned the Google searches, but it's going to be much more accurate than that. The cell phone data, not only are we going to have him pinging up and down the highway, his cell phone connecting to cell towers to and from his home to the campus, but there's ad tech data. Ad tech data is that data that streams from your phone. So your Weather Channel app, the reason why it knows your location and what the weather is where you are is because of ad tech data. And that data all requires a search warrant now. And so does ping data, tower data. But my guess is that evidence exists as well, and that will actually put him in location. Like that's maybe a 10 by 10 yard radius that ad tech can put you in. And so that's going to be even more helpful. And then, of course, there's the videos that his parents recognized him, Twiggs recognized him. How anybody is saying there's no evidence is beyond me. Those people aren't serious people. I don't care who they are. They're tinfoil hat, podcast clickbait people. But this case has already, in my mind, been proven beyond a reasonable doubt. Now they got to get it all admitted in court the proper way. But I don't think that's going to be very difficult for this team.
And Jay, you add in your thread information as well about how the bullets that were found and specifically the etchings on them give us not only the motive in this case, but also the fact that since it was a political motive, that leads to one of the enhancements for aggravated murder.
That's very important. Thank you for bringing that up. Yeah. So in Utah, and there are lots of aggravators to get to the death penalty. One of them is that you are motivated by politics, especially the politics of the murder victim, in this case, Charlie Kirk. And hey, fascist catch is a very obvious. This is political. This isn't a religious thing or some other personal grudge. And there's a lot to do with the LGBTQ community. The OWO, what's this? The bulge. That's a furry community thing. The Antifa remarks and things like that. The fact that he actually talked about, I believe it was with his father and also with Twiggs, that Charlie Kirk he just couldn't. It was in the note. You just can't negotiate away hate. And then of course the Oh Bella Ciao, Ciao Ciao. That's part of the Antifa anthem. And the fact that LMAO is on there just lets you know that this guy has no remorse. His crying the next day was that he was caught. His crying the next day was not that he wish he hadn't done it. It's wish he hadn't done it and gotten caught. And I don't feel any remorse for Tyler Robinson. He's got the death penalty coming, and then he still has hell to look forward to.
Well, and we now know that, at that point, that's when investigators were already beginning to, to start to put things together. They put the pieces together of the images of the shooter from the stairwell, tracked back the black-clad figure who was on the roof to that figure on the stairwell. They also went back to the car. And in fact, there was a police officer who had an interaction with that car, that 2013 Dodge Challenger, and an individual in the night had run the license plate, already had the name Tyler Robinson, or I believe, that he later ran the plate and got the name of Tyler Robinson. So it was already becoming a situation where this guy was going to get arrested one way or the other because of the amount of the evidence. Jack Posobiec back. Real America's Voice, Human Events Daily.
Call this the Jack Posobiec Appreciation Hour. I can say confidently, I think Josh Shapiro would be the vice presidential nominee if it wasn't for Jack Posobiec. And that is, I'm being honest.
All right, we're back. Jack Posobiec here, live, Real America's Voice, Human Events Daily. We're on with Jay Town, former U.S. attorney in the first Trump administration. Jay, you wanted to finish a point you were making regarding that issue of the evidence publication, because look, I've always said, even beyond this trial, beyond anything I've been directly connected to, just when it comes to these cases, that I think that putting out more evidence ultimately is in the public good, and it's better not just, by the way, for our society, it's also better for the integrity of the judicial system. Wanted to get your final thought on that.
Yeah, and what I was saying is that normally I would disagree with you prior to a trial. Certainly, everything should be made public that happens in the courtroom. But because of the way the defense has interacted with the public, because of the tinfoil hat crowd that has taken nothing burgers and turned it into a smorgasbord, I think it's actually a really good idea in this particular case to have as much public as possible, because as much as you don't want to poison the well for yourself as a prosecutor to make voir dire just so laborious, you also don't want people coming in having already formed an opinion. They don't let you know about that because they've subscribed to some of these ridiculous conspiracy theories online. And so getting as much in this case, for whatever reason, this is a one off, but it is a high profile case. Getting that information out there is absolutely critical. I'm glad they didn't use a grand jury in Utah to seek the death penalty, where everything would be secret. Having the prelim, at least most folks got to understand the evidence as it was presented.
No, I think that's right. And I would also say, in cases like this, and you mentioned other homicide cases, murder cases, I'm still so taken aback by this bombshell interview of Twigs. This is the significant other. This is the boyfriend. This is the roommate. This is someone that is who's as close to Tyler Robinson as anyone could be. In fact, may have even formed, sort of partial, some partial motive here for Tyler, trying to, to impress this Twigs, impress his online community, these friends or fans that he had in his chat group online, and so and yet we get the testimony of him testifying against Tyler Robinson. What do you make of that interview?
Yeah, it was as damning as any piece of evidence. I mean, he being Tyler Robinson, admitted to Twigs multiple times in various different forms that he killed Charlie Kirk. And Twigs also, he could have been an alibi witness. No, he was here with me all day. What are you guys talking about? Our apartment was broken into a couple of weeks ago, and the Mauser came up missing. I mean, he could have twisted his mustache into any kind of a story to protect Tyler Robinson, but he didn't. To his credit, I suppose he didn't, and it has sunk Tyler Robinson's defense because one, I mean, all the planning, all the admissions. There's no way for some mental health defense in this particular case at this point, based on everything we know that Tyler did in the run up to the murder, and then afterwards with the request to obstruct justice and things like that, partially burning the note that was left under the keyboard. But it also takes away, I mean, look, you're not going to feel sorry for Tyler Robinson because his lover, his boyfriend, is saying, yeah, he did something wrong here, and I'm going to tell the police about it because it was wrong, and that is very damning in and of itself. His parents might have to testify as well, so might the family friend. At least any interactions they had with Tyler. Those are non-hearsay, so they're admissible in court. Anything Tyler said to anybody is admissible, and certainly their interactions with the police and as to why they called him. Well, I recognize my son as the shooter. I mean, holy moly, right? That's my mom saying that.
And of course we have those statements. Now we know the defense didn't, or excuse me, the prosecution or the defense did not call the parents to the stand, of course, in this instance. Yet they were there in the courtroom. They were there in the courtroom
Yeah.
every day, obviously representing their son as opposed to appearing specifically as witnesses. But Jay, do you think that this thing ends, assuming this goes to trial, do the parents of Tyler Robinson get called to the stand?
If this goes to trial, they absolutely have to be called to the stand, and there's no way that anybody could keep them off the stand. Meaning there's no privileges that exist that disallow their testimony. And look, if the state of Utah is serious about the death penalty, then there has to be a trial because the only way to get death in Utah is if 12 people award it to you after a guilty verdict. You move on to the death phase, and they decide what the penalty is going to be: life without parole or death. So it would have to go to trial to give him the death penalty, and the parents have to testify. And that is a I mean, think about it. Mom and dad are not going to want to do it. The defense counsel is going to come up and talk about their troubled son and how there was falling out. And, that's fine. But his mom just recognized him on TV at the crime scene, and the very clothes that the shooter was wearing. And so with all the other evidence and the admissions that Tyler no doubt made to them, especially to the father when he was questioning him about, I want to see the gun. I want to see the Mauser. Okay, Dad, I'll get back to you. Right. I mean, there's reasons for those suspicions, and the father's going to have to tell it. And I do hate that for the parents. I do. But that's just how it is. You raised a murderer.
And it's something where just having spent some, a lengthy time in the same room as them, they seem like decent people. They seem like good people. His parents are victims too, in many ways, and just in the sense that, they were not trying to do anything like this. And I have to give them credit for picking up the phone and doing what they did, because that's
Exactly.
got to be one of
Yep.
the hardest phone calls you ever have to make, especially as a father, especially as a mother, to pick up the phone and knowing what's going to happen after the fact, that you're going to do that. And I can't imagine, Jay, that any parent would do that unless they were sure.
Correct. And I think one of the ways they were sure was not just the images, but in their conversations with Tyler Robinson. That's how they were sure. They specifically asked him, was that you? And he said, yes. That's me guessing. We haven't heard that out of their mouth yet, but they turned their son in and probably saved their son's life. He might have taken his own life, or, maybe resisted with violence. I don't know if he had other weapons in the home. But that was, I think, their motivation is, we can lose our son much, much later, or we can lose him today. And I think that was just awful and terrible choices. That was, they had to choose between those. But they did the right thing, as did Twiggs. All these people in Robinson's life did the right thing. So you can't tell me, and this is my argument as a prosecutor, his parents did the right thing. His lover did the right thing. All these people closest to him did the right thing. You can't tell me that he didn't know right from wrong. You can't tell me that he didn't know what the right thing was, because these people around him knew, right?
Well, they knew,
and
and they were the people who raised him, at least in the case of the parents.
Right.
And again, as to your point, and just as we only have a minute left, but the point that you raised, I think, is so important, that crazy people, lunatics, don't plan to at this level. They don't premeditate to this level. 3 hours away and going up on the roof, hiding it the way that he did, writing the letter beforehand, writing the pre-scheduled auto text beforehand. I mean, this just shows a level of planning, but it clearly shows a clarity, a direct clarity of intent in that planning.
Yep. People that plead insanity successfully, they do not know right from wrong. He did. That's why you secret things down your pants. That's why you hide things in a towel. That's why you go back for the gun and ask people to shred the letter. That's why the letter's partially burnt, that admitted to all of this. So
he knew.
I know you got to go, but this was great.
Because he knew. Jay, where can people go to follow you, man? Where can people follow you?
At J-Town Alabama on X. At J-Town Alabama on X.
Great follow. Make sure you include him on yours. Ladies and gentlemen, as always, you have my permission to lay ashore.